Hello, welcome back. Hope you're all well. I put up a video there yesterday, the day before, took it down because I said that people probably wouldn't understand what I went through in that video. You know, they probably just wouldn't get it. So I took it down. But it wasn't the best of videos, like it wasn't nice because it was trauma based, you know, because to do with, like, I grew up in the 60s. I was born in 1963. So back in those days, things were so much different. There was no internet and um, there was just people to talk to each other. And, a lot of people didn't want to talk about what personal issues was going on in their homes. Excuse me, get yourselves a nice drink. But they wouldn't talk about, personal stuff that was going on in their homes. And a lot of children would have suffered because of that, um, because it's like when my grandmother would say to us, and you wouldn't say that to children today. I have the sunglasses on because it's very sunny here, extremely sunny, and because I have the glaucoma, so you'll have to put up with this face. But yeah, you couldn't say that to children today now because it would be called, what do you call us? Where parents, um, oh, I don't know, they'd be ringing the authorities if something happened with children, that if children weren't treated right and they didn't have this and they didn't have that and, all this kind of thing. Even in schools, if something happens, they'd be someone higher up to deal with it. So, so our higher up would be our sisters, our older sisters, and then it would be the aunts. My older sisters would be friendly with my aunts, say, together. But she couldn't go to the middle sister now, the golden child as she'd be called, because she was a piece of work. She gave my mother a hard time, but and then my mother had a temper, as well, and they kind of both, you know, clashed. But I was the smallest, then my oldest sister, and then the golden child in the middle. So I want to tell you this story now about the golden child. I don't know how I recovered at all, but I did. My mother would go into town to do the shopping, and I'd be often left with the middle sister. And she used to act kind of weird, Well, to me, she acted kind of weird, but I was, a quiet child, as I've said before. I just stand there looking. I didn't know how to react because I was never allowed to react. But she got one of her mad fits, and my mother had bought a new net curtain for the big kitchen window. Now, back in those days, that would have meant, it would be a big thing to get a new net curtain, a nice white net curtain. But my sister, for some reason, got it into her head. She was in some sort of a mood, and she struck a match. There was no heavy curtains up now with this net curtain, But she got it into her head to strike the match and set it underneath the white net curtain to test it. Whoosh! The whole net curtain went whoosh, just shot up, burnt. So she decided not to get into trouble herself, and she decided to say to the mother that I did it. And, you know, speechless, speechless as I was, I couldn't stand up for myself. So I was waiting for the mother to wallop me, but she didn't, because for some reason my mother knew that I didn't do it. She knew it was her, because it was only me and her, and my mother knew that I didn't do things like that, you know. So, and she knew that I didn't do those sort of things, because the way my mother would look at it is, anyway, she'd know I wouldn't have matches. You know, it's not something I would have in my possession as matches, but because my sister was older and she was sneaking the cigarettes on my mother, and my older sister was doing it, she'd know that she'd have access to the matches, because I certainly wouldn't be. They'd be up on a big high mantelpiece anyway, and I wouldn't be able to reach them. So she did that, and thank God I didn't get walloped, you know. She didn't care if I did or not, as long as she was after saving her own skin. But I remember an incident with my brother that one time the golden sister had spat on me. And my brother took really, offence to that. And she was over at the kitchen window, and he was so angry after her doing that that he threw a polish brush, and she ducked, and the brush broke the window, went out through the window. It was a small polish brush. So my mother came home and got angry. My brother got walloped. But the same night, she got a casserole dish, you know, the big ones. My mother used to use the big casserole dishes to put my stepfather's dinner in the oven. And my middle sister, the golden one, same night that happened with the polish brush and my brother, when she spat on me, she held it up and like this in front of us all and just let go and smashed it. Now, what I could take from that was my mother went out that night and she didn't want my mother going out. So she got in one of her moods, you know, so that my mother would take notice when she came home that I don't want you going out. She, she started trying to gain control at a young age, because she did start drinking at a young age. So we all suffered because of that, and she continued to do that. So I mostly suffered because she would come in the night after being out, even at the age of 14. I would be sitting out next door in the next bungalow in my grandmother's house, and she would become demanding. I would be waiting for my mother to come home and my grandmother to come home, but she would become demanding and say to me, come on, you're coming out next door with me, out to our house, our own bungalow next door. And I would get a few wallops from her. Never a sorry, never a regret, never, I shouldn't have done that to you. She just, I don't know what was wrong with her, but there was something wrong with her, and I can only put it down to maybe she had mental health issues, because later in life she You know, she did have issues. So that happened. Christmas time, I can only remember one Christmas time. I can only remember one Christmas time. I suppose maybe I would remember one or two more if I really thought about it, whereas I moved on, I don't. And the mother would hide the toys in the hot press. And I remember getting a book, bedtime stories, and I read it over and over. That book. I loved that book. I remember it was blue on the cover. And then my sister, she got this fancy one, my middle sister did. And I actually don't know what my older sister got. But I remember my grandmother used to have this huge box of, chocolates with all these fancy chocolates in the box. And you were allowed to have two, you know, and you could pick out the two that you wanted. But I always remember that massive box of chocolates my grandmother had, and her opening the paper, taking off the lids and opening the paper, tissue paper, and these beautiful handmade chocolates inside, and she'd give us two um, out of the box. So that really was. I have vague memories of little stockings, netted stockings with a Santa on the top of them. And I think there'd be some sweets in them in home now. I can remember that. But Christmas dinner wasn't a thing. Um, we didn't, I don't remember any Christmas dinner. There wouldn't be a turkey or anything like that. My mother used to buy this Angel Delight. It was like a custard. You get it in pink and you'd get it in yellow. It was like a cream. You'd mix it with milk. Just taking a cup of tea to keep the fluids in. Yeah, the Angel Delight. And sometimes the sisters were so clever, like my mother'd lock it into the wardrobe. She'd lock stuff into the wardrobe. But my sisters, we were all taught then, of course, once. My sisters taught me this. Like, I didn't do it, but they did it. They were able to pull the end of the wardrobe door open and put their hand, because their hand was small, when my mother wasn't there when she was out, and take out the Angel Delight and then rip the packet open, and we'd use it as sherbet with our finger, not with a lollipop, with our finger, and we'd all get some. But they were, they were clever, and they were teaching me how to be clever. But this, was afraid to do anything because the mother was so strict. So because they'd be held to pay, like if you did anything wrong, that'd be it. But we would go up, because we lived in the mountain, high up in the mountain. We would go off and look for holly with the berries on it, and the mother would say, bring back the holly that has the red berries on it. Look for the holly with the red berries. So we'd have to do that. And I remember the holly was very prickly, It was painful to break them off, but she would do it because, pictures, like, she would get the holly and she would stick it down the back of the picture frame. And that's the way she did the decoration for the Christmas. She'd have the holly stuck down, and there was no Christmas tree. That wouldn't have came later. That wouldn't have happened until later in my life when my mother remarried, you know. We would do the decorations for her then. But the things, you know, the things that do come up in your mind, that you sit there in the day and a memory will come back to you and you want to share it, you know. You just, times were hard, I'm telling you, and sisters were hard work, and, you know, as I said, people there wasn't anyone to go to. There was your older sisters or your aunts, and, you know, me and my older sister and my middle sister, I would be like dragged in the middle because my older sister would want me with her, and then the middle sister would want me with her. So I was like an elastic. I was being pulled from one side to the other, and that was going on my whole life, you know. They wanted me, but yes, it wasn't wanting me to treat me nice. No, none of them. Not one of them were, you know, nice. They just wanted to get, because they didn't get along, they just kind of wanted to get one over on the other by saying, I took her away from you. And the other one would say the same thing. I took her away from you, so look at me, I'm better. You know, this nonsense that was going on back then, you know, competition. And it was going on in a lot of families, you know. A lot of children, from what I gathered as I got older, there were sisters that just did not get along. But when you're the youngest out of them sisters, you see a lot, and there's nothing you can do about it. Do you know? So that's my little story for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all in my next one, and have a lovely day. Bye for now.